Professor Mehran Kamrava, Professor indeed of Government at Georgetown University. Always a real pleasure to see you, Professor. Just tell us about Israel Katz's statement and what Israel's war aims are in Lebanon. Are they achievable?
They're not achievable. The war aims are meant to prolong the war as long as possible and possibly to expand it. I think Israel and Israeli leaders feel emboldened by Donald Trump's election. They would like to continue the war and to expand to reach their goals as much as possible up until January 20th, when Trump takes office. And I think that what we're seeing is kind of Netanyahu extending the war as long as possible, particularly in order to fend off domestic political criticism. We know that there was just a court ruling against him saying that corruption charges should not be delayed because of what's happening. And so he's trying to ensure that the rally around the flag effect continues as long as possible.
Leaving Gaza aside, but just looking at Israel's policy towards Lebanon, is this a mistake by the Biden administration, and might it be a continuing mistake by the Trump administration? Could the mistake be the miscalculation of defeating Hezbollah, but that resulting in a much, much weaker Lebanon, in which much worse could be to come for the Middle East?
That's absolutely possible. I think, we've always seen the danger of Netanyahu overplaying his hand. First of all, I think it's important to remember that American foreign policy has been non-existent in relation to what's happening, or at least it's been enabling Israel in achieving its goals and in doing whatever it wants. We just heard, for example, the kind of almost unconditional supply of all kinds of weaponry to Israel. So the American foreign policy factor doesn't really figure into this. But what we're seeing is, if the war expands right here already in the Persian Gulf region, many leaders are expressing apprehension about Iran's reaction. What will Iran do if it completely loses Hezbollah, or if it figures that Lebanon is indeed on the verge of implosion and Israel is going to further expand its influence across the region? The Iranians haven't necessarily responded positively to threats, and they've actually been dangerous when they've been cornered. And in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in the UAE, in Bahrain, there's a keen awareness that you don't necessarily want to corner Iran, because then Iran is going to behave in very erratic and unpredictable ways. So there's a cascading effect here that I think we need to take into account. And unfortunately, Netanyahu wants to expand the war, while everybody else wants to see the war contained, and of course the misery and the ethnic cleansing and genocide come to an end.
You've absolutely taken it to where I wanted to go, because this could well be, could it not just an Israeli campaign against the people of Gaza and the Palestinians and against Hezbollah in Lebanon, but actually a concentrated effort to reduce Iran's influence across the region. And if Marco Rubio does become Secretary of State, being an anti-Iran hawk, what are the possibilities of the Trump presidency, which of course took the US out of the JCPOA, the international nuclear deal, that things become much harsher in terms of the Western and US-led response to Iran?
That's an excellent question, and I wish we had a very definitive answer to it. It's hard to predict because, on the one hand, as you mentioned, Trump is installing or nominating one hawk after another. But at the same time, we saw during his first term that Trump realized that he didn't want war. He is ultimately a businessman, and wars are not good for business. And I think Trump will listen to his regional friends and allies here in the Persian Gulf region, telling him that they do not want war with Iran. So I think it's hard to tell. Remember also that Trump has pointedly not included John Bolton or Mike Pompeo in his new administration reportedly because they were a little too trigger happy. So whether or not Marco Rubio is going to kind of continue a bullying policy against Iran, we'll have to wait and see what Donald Trump will end up doing. But certainly the signs so far do not point in a positive direction.
Professor Mehran Kamrava, thank you so much, Professor.